Hello everyone, my name is Jesse Dotterer and I'm a biology major at Cazenovia College. I want to thank you all for coming and listening to this presentation on the positive impacts of vegetal protein-based diets. Importance. There's a need for change. There needs to be a change in how humans are living. We are already seeing the environmental consequences firsthand with this dramatic fluctuation in temperature and weather due to the rise of carbon emissions. If we don't do something to change our ways now, the effects of human involvement will be seen with much heavier consequences for future generations. The beef industry and the dairy industry. The beef industry is the main source of greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, and water usage within agriculture. Dairy cows and their manure produce greenhouse gases, which contribute to climate change. Runoff from fertilizer and manure on dairy farms can pollute water resources and reduce the amount of oxygen needed by aquatic plants and organisms. Human health. The current average American diet consists of high processed foods, high-fat dairy, and a considerable amount of animal-based protein. The obesity rate in America is steadily increasing, with the CDC predicting approximately 42.4% of Americans are obese. Obesity contributes to the #1 killer in America, cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease causes every 1 in 3 deaths in the U.S. annually and is responsible for 17% of healthcare spending. And it also leads to malnutrition. As many as 828 million people suffer from malnutrition worldwide. Food productive capacity will have to increase by at least 50% by 2050 to feed everyone in the world. And here we have a graph of our carbon emissions from NASA. Introduction. Impacts of vegetal protein-based diets and how they can positively impact our environment and human health world food systems. In the environment, Goldstein et al. Found that replacing beef for plant-based products could reduce the amount of land used for agriculture to 10% and produce 4% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. If we all went vegan, the world's food-related emissions would drop by 70% by 2050. Human health. Vegetal-based diets can improve effects on weight status, energy metabolism, systemic inflammation, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. Levels in glycated hemoglobin, a long-term marker for glucose levels, decreased. Levels of low-density and high-density lipoprotein, as well as total cholesterol, decreased when consuming a plant-based diet compared to an animal protein-based diet. If we can lower the risk of obesity, we can lower the risk of cardiovascular disease. World food systems. According to the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, if U.S. farmers used all of the land devoted to animal agriculture to grow plant crops instead, they can double the number of people sustained and feed an additional 390 million people. There are several hurdles in promoting vegetal protein-based diets. Animal protein-based diets are rooted into American culture, and consumers are not convinced that plant-based protein substitutes will taste good and have the same texture as meat. Questions and hypotheses. So the main question of this study was, do individuals with a vegetal protein-based diet consume enough protein in accordance with the recommended dietary allowance? And the null hypothesis for this was, yes, they do. And as you can see, we have some delicious vegan foods here. And it doesn't have to be boring. Continued. Another question the study asked was, how does a vegetal protein-based diet compare to an animal protein-based diet in terms of weight in pounds and protein in grams? And for the weight, it was assumed that the average weights would be different between the two groups. And for the protein, it was assumed that the grams in protein would be similar. And here we have some more vegan dishes here. Again, does not have to be boring. 3 main objectives of this study. To determine if there's a statistical difference between vegetal protein-based diets and animal protein-based diets based on macromolecule intake and weight. The second objective was to conduct a dietary research study using a volunteer participation survey, MyFitnessPal, and data collection forms. And the third objective, to determine if a vegetal protein-based diet is better for human health and to increase awareness of healthy eating habits that are beneficial to the environment, the economy, and world food systems. Methods. Setup of experiment. So there were several things to do to promote this study. It was promoted on Facebook, into vegetarian, vegan groups. A college-wide email was used to track participation in this study. Several Google Forms had to be created as well. The volunteer participation form, which collected demographic data about the participants such as age, gender, and overall indicated their willingness to participate in the study for the 5 days. MyFitnessPal was probably the most important thing of this entire study. It allowed participants to track their daily consumption and just easily add food throughout these 5 days, quick and easy. And it automatically calculated the total number of protein in grams, grams in carbohydrates, and grams in lipids. And the next thing that was used was data collection forms. This collected the actual data during the study, so weight in pounds on the first day, and then for the rest of the 5 days, it collected grams in protein, grams in carbs, and grams in lipids. And here we have the MyFitnessPal logo. Continued. Maintenance of experiment. This experiment was a lot to maintain. Information had to be sorted in a manner that was easy to find, I guess. It was a little difficult to sort this information. But Word doc was used, Excel was used, and all this information, like from the volunteer participation form, was put into Excel or the Word doc. Contact information was easier to keep in a Word doc and keep track of like who to text, whether they wanted the email reminders or the text reminders. The next thing I had to do was respond to participant questions, and this had to be done in a time-efficient manner, and I had to get back to people as soon as possible. The last thing that was done were email and text reminders. These had to be like set up beforehand. So these were scheduled to go out at 5 p.m., 9 p.m., and 11 p.m. to remind participants how to do the study. Data collection, animal protein. So as you can see, this is how I sorted the data into Excel. This is specifically for protein. You can see the participant number here, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. You have the averages of the 5 days, and then you have the recommended dietary allowance, so I'll get to this in a minute. And then you have the vegetal protein group here. So this yellow means that the participant did not meet the recommended dietary allowance for protein in grams. And as you can see here, on the animal protein diet, there was a lot more people that didn't meet the recommended dietary allowance. Results. So for red, we have animal-based protein, green, we have vegetal-based protein. But for the protein data, we found that the mean of the two groups was relatively the same, and there was more variation within the red group, which was expected. And then you have the weights for the two groups, and you see here the vegetal protein-based group was significantly lower, or they had a general lower weight than the animal protein-based diet group. There were several t-tests that were used in this study. This one focused on weight, and this is the important one here. This said that the data was statistically significant because the p-value is below 0.05. So we can conclude here that the data between the difference between the two groups in weight was significant. For protein, the average mean was like exactly the same. So this was the thing that was the most on par throughout the study, which kind of shocked me a little bit too. But hey, and then these just explain if they met the recommended dietary allowance in weight for the t-test. Continued, I did this for carbs and lipids too. So for the carbs and lipids, there was like more variation between the two. So this was actually less on par than the protein here. Protein was most on par for both groups. Discussion, limiting factors and hurdles. There was a lot of trouble recruiting for this study. A lot of people were motivated by money. And of course, if I had money, I probably would have gotten a ton more participants. If to account for the gender disparity. So as you can see here, most of the people that participated in the study were female. We had 4 males, and we did have a trans man participate in the study. So we can't account for the differences in protein between gender. We also can't account for the difference in age. We had people 18 to 57 participate in the study. If it was a smaller age range, the data would be more accurate, and we can determine a better result from this. We also can't account for the height of participants or the unknown body compositions. We don't know if this person could have bodybuilders. We don't know how much fat is on this person or how much muscle they have. And we also don't know if the protein they're eating is complete versus incomplete, which means they aren't getting the essential amino acids. If they have incomplete proteins, they're not getting the essential amino acids that are required. And for complete, they are getting all the amino acids required in the diet. And this just shows the gender here, this graph here, and references. Questions?